Hello, good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this session about alternatives to lectures in online courses, part two. This is an addition to the first part. And to give you a little bit of context, basically what I want to do here is to share with you some strategies and some instructional methods that I myself have used in the past that are a good alternative to lectures. Sometimes you don't want to record a lecture. Sometimes you struggle with lectures because the way it engages a student can be challenging. So we are going to be sharing 10 additional strategies today. My name is Miko Nino, Director of the Office of Online Learning at UNCP, and I welcome you to this session. Please remember that this session is going to be posted online, so we're going to provide an overview, but if you have to go back and review the content, you are going to be able to do so. If you have any questions, I'm going to be stopping along the way and ask you if you have any questions, and you can let me know, and you can type in the chat box and we will take a look at the very end. So as I mentioned the first time that we did this session, lectures work. I myself am a huge fan of lectures, and by no means I want to use this presentation as a mechanism to antagonize lecturing. I believe there is some content that has to be delivered via lectures. Sometimes there is so much foundational knowledge and basic knowledge that you cannot really ask people to discuss or to start working hands-on. They need to master some background information, and it's through the lectures that you achieve so. By no means I will be one of those telling you to never lecture again. I know that happens with all this micro-learning, new wave of technology that happens in teaching and learning. But I tell you, lectures work, you can engage people, and you have to continue using this instructional method when applicable. I just want to provide other options because it is true that in other instances, you might be better off using something else. As I have always mentioned, for me, it's really important to always send the message that you can teach online, you can have a really fancy course, you can have the latest technology, but what really matters is good instruction and good instructional design. The same as face-to-face, good instruction will always lead the process. The technology is something that you add on, and it's a medium to deliver the content. But always remember that the same strong principles that you apply in online courses are to be applied here. And we have the same goals as in the first session. We are going to be sharing the alternatives to you. We're going to describe how they work, and then we're going to talk about the benefits. I want you to evaluate the benefits so you can actually implement them. Let's get started. So the first one is project-based learning. And with project-based learning, many people think that it's just a project and you ask them to work on a project. And it is true that you need to have a project, but actual project-based learning is very complex. And it's something that if you don't have the time, I recommend you not to do because it can be troublesome. You need to have time. And I'm going to explain to you how it works. But this is really useful when you need to actually see your students complete something hands-on. The difference between project-based learning and inquiry-based learning, they're fairly similar, is that here you have instances of delivering a prototype, creating something. With inquiry, you can just leave it at the research knowledge level. Here you have more application. That's the main difference. So if you decide to have project-based learning in your class, you always have to have, you must have an instructional goal. What is that you want them to achieve? And you have to provide some context to your students. That means that you can give some background information, you can ask them to watch some videos, read something, so they can get a common ground, everyone. After that, you need one or two or maybe three driving questions. Some people, some faculty members, they want the students to be able to create those questions. I'm one of those that in the interest of time, you're better off giving the questions to them, or at least being a good coach. So when they come up with the questions, you help them frame them in an effective way. If you have bad questions, the whole process will fail. After that, you give your students time to do some research, to do some inquiry. They are going to be able to look for resources. They can use videos, they can read chapters, they can interview people, they can attend webinars, they can attend demonstrations, anything that they want. And you supervise the process, but it's on them to actually be able to find the information. And you have to do here some training so they can identify what's a reliable source. After that, when you know they know the problem, the question, they spend time with research, then you have to negotiate with them the solution. Okay, now that we know the problem, now that you have some research, what solution you offer to that problem? Is that a research paper that is going to add to the body of knowledge? Is it a video that other people can use? Is it going to be an e-portfolio? Is it going to be maybe a presentation? Is it going to be a podcast? What deliverable that is going to solve that problem? You're going to provide a digital storytelling project. After that, you're going to engage in prototyping and feedback. Your students are going to prototype that deliverable, and then you're going to give feedback. And that can be repeated 2 or 3 times or so to refine that very end project. After that, your students are going to spend some time presenting to others that project and explaining the process. And finally, you have to engage them in a reflection process. So you are not going to be lecturing, but you are going to have a very important role as a facilitator and as a coach, because you're going to be guiding them along the way, but they're going to be engaged because it's very hands-on instead of you just delivering the content and then being more passive about it. So the benefits is that when you, and this is good for grad courses especially, because you foster project management skills, and that's one skills that employers, they want to look at. And us as professionals, we benefit from project management. So it allows you to provide more expertise than usual, because you are going to become, as I said, a coach, a guru, an expert. When you're lecturing, you're just delivering content, and yes, you're still the expert, but they can really take advantage of the whole expertise that you have in your field, because you have so many steps to complete. You're going to be fostering the 4 C's, that's a whole body of knowledge: creativity, communication, critical thinking, and collaboration, because all of them are involved when you are implementing PBL. Your students are going to learn how to find and evaluate reliable information. Very important skill, especially in higher education, in academia. They need to go ahead and find the sources and the information, but at the same time, they have to find something reliable, something that is valid. And it promotes design thinking, that prototyping, that feedback, that's part of design thinking. Very important methodology these days. If you want to foster that in your courses, design thinking, think about PBL. And you're going to be given a lot of feedback. So it's not that you're not going to be part of this. You're actually I will say, even more involved than when just lecturing. So some technologies that I recommend for making this happen is Trello. Trello, and you can get a free version. Most of the things that I'm going to talk about today are free. All of the ones that we have here are free to an extent. If you want Pro, you have to pay some, but you can use them for free. So Trello is a space for project management, for sharing ideas, thoughts, for brainstorming, and you can collaborate. They can add you to Trello. You can actually see the interaction between the teams if you want to use Team PBL. So I encourage you to do that. I like to have a combo of Trello plus Portfolio. Portfolio is integrated with Canvas, and you can use it for free. It's already integrated. They bought it 2 years ago, something like that. And basically, that's for displaying those projects at the very end and to have the reflection assessment process. WhatsApp is a mobile learning app that allows communication between teammates and between classmates. And they can share ideas, they can share brainstorming sessions and all of that. I encourage mobile-based learning because these projects are very complex and you might want to have something like that. And your students are going to communicate via mobile learning. Even if you don't use it directly, they will. So consider that one. I like Prezi, that's free. And it's a mechanism to present content, but the way It's good for diagrams and for process and steps. That's a good tool to document the projects and the process they went through. And I like Slack. Slack also, it's a good communication tool. They can share files, they can talk to each other, they can basically share any information. Keep in mind that the free version is limited to 10,000 messages, but if they don't need to keep a log of those messages, that's completely fine. Trello is a project management tool that allows you to do, as I said, brainstorming sessions, share documentation, put steps, refine ideas. It's like a sandbox. So I really encourage you to play with that. And as I mentioned before, I'm not really getting paid or endorsing this company, but Flipgrid, and you will see this a lot in instructional methods today. It really helps students to share through short videos, ideas, thoughts, brainstorming sessions, research questions, hesitations, doubts, anything they have, and they can interact with each other, and you can be part of this conversation and see that evolution, that thought process. As I said, I encourage you to use this one. And the good thing about this is that your students are already using things like this, like TikTok. It's very famous these days. So if you want to leverage their ability to communicate via short videos, Flipgrid is the way to go. So let's talk about our next instructional method, task cards. And there are variations of this, especially if you're going to do it online. So I'm going to explain to you the way I have used it and the way I have benefited from this instructional methodology. But this and any other example that I'm going to show you today can be customized. You definitely, as an instructor, should customize these instructional methods to make it fit your courses. So how does this work? You are going to provide ahead of the class a couple of key terms or key ideas that your students should be mindful of. So let's say that you're going to ask them, okay, you have to read chapter 3, you have to watch this YouTube video, you have to, listen to this podcast. But when you're doing that, pay attention to these key elements or words. It's up to you. You tell them that ahead though. When the time comes to the class, let's say that you meet via WebEx or you open the module in Canvas, that very day, you're going to assign one word or two words, or depending on how many students you have and how many key terms you have, to each student. Before that day, I don't know what words I'm going to have. I have no idea. I will learn when the module opens or when I come to class. And then what happens is like you are going to start a conversation. It's not a lecture, but throughout that conversation, you are going to ask students, okay, Jessica, for example, what just your task card said? What was your word? And then maybe she had something like behaviorism. So she will have then to provide a definition of the word, and then she will have to use an example. And then, if possible, I even ask them to apply that term to a real life setting or how that can be used. I tend to ask those 3 pieces of information when using the task card. Again, you can have a variation of this. Make sure you encourage your students to tell you more, because sometimes they might be too short with the answers. And the idea here is for you to see the demonstration that they understood the content. And again, make sure you clarify misconceptions. This is an excellent opportunity because if they are getting the wrong idea, this is the moment to correct that. Everybody has to pay attention to whatever everybody else is saying, but listening to other classmates explain, it's sometimes more engaging and in a way more clear than when you're just shooting all the content in a 1-hour lecture. You really learn, not only because everybody's involved in the conversation, but because they are using exemplification and also application. And you can spend the whole session just asking your students to elaborate on the word they had to describe. The good thing about this is, as I said, they don't know what word they're going to get. So basically, they have to be prepared for all the key terms that you gave them before class. That's the tricky part. So I like this one because it promotes memorization and application. There are things that I believe you have to memorize. I mean, I cannot imagine a chemist having to go and check notes to see what element on the table. That's not something that is possible. In my field, I need to know, for instance, what's cognitivism. I just need to know. I cannot just go and look for notes. So there are things in your field in which memorization is important. It's key. You need to know on top of your head what that is, and also the application. So this exercise allows them to elaborate a definition, be prepared to share the definition, and also speak about application. This provides an early assessment because sometimes when you lecture for too long and then they have to study, that's a little bit, that's a lot that they have to digest in a way. This technique, from day one, they have to go through a formative assessment because they have to explain to others the definition, the example, the application. It really helps with oral and written communication because if you're doing this synchronous, they have to use the microphone, explain to the class via WebEx. If they're using a Canvas to do that via the discussion board, they have to write. So it's a good promotion of those skills. It allows you to clarify misconceptions. Sometimes when you're in a lecture, you have no idea if they're getting the right thing. When you see your students explaining to you those key terms, that's when you can tell if they're getting the right thing or not. And also, this really ensures your students are going through the content. Again, they don't know what word they will have to elaborate on. So basically, they have to be prepared for all the key terms that you provide ahead of time. So some of the tools that I recommend for these are Quizlet. It's free and it's like flashcards. It integrates well with Canvas. I really like it. And it provides the words right there. So your students can, be told what word they have to elaborate on. Flipgrid is another mechanism. If you're teaching a class asynchronously and you give them a word, they can record themselves in Flipgrid explaining the definition, giving an example, and the application. And also Google Forms is really good. When you are talking about Google Forms, make sure you go to the settings and you click on quizzes and you make the form a quiz, because that way they can get feedback right away. They can even get points or a grade. And basically they can submit a short answer and you can see when they type when they provide the answer, if they get the right term, if they have a good definition. I'm going to stop here for a second and I'm going to see if you have any questions. And I'm gonna go here through the chat. What's the number of key terms for a model would you recommend? Honestly, I will not go beyond 10 in the interest of time, but it really depends on the number of students that you have. It really depends. But 10, it's about a good one, because what you want to achieve at the end of that lesson is mastery. And I'd rather have 10 terms that are fully elaborated and developed than 50 or 40 that at the end nobody's really sure about. 10 is a good number to clarify the misconception, understand the example, and of course, understand the application. Yeah, and I'm reading the comments that you have here. Yes, good comments. I think Rita is making really good comments about that. Trello, I already explained. So again, this is an overview. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of more questions once you go through these. Feel free to contact us and we're happy to talk about actual further steps and implementation. So Google Forms, that's integrated with Google here at UNCP. So you will not have a problem because that's free and it's compliant with the school and accessibility and all of that. So let's talk about video-based learning. Video-based learning is just more than just random videos. There's a whole pedagogical approach to that. So make sure that when you create a video, every video needs to have a learning objective. Don't make your students watch a video for the sake of, because you are going to lose engagement. I understand that videos, because I myself have done that, you use them as an icebreaker, as an illustration and all of that. but really think how that video that you are about to show them is connected to your learning objective. When you're recording your video, I suggest that you first create a script because you will need that for accessibility purposes anyway, but also it helps you to stay focused on the learning objective. And I will not go beyond 15 minutes or less. I'm talking about video-based learning. If you have a recording of a session, that's fine, and that's called something else. But if you want to call it video-based learning, these are the principles. Usually we're looking at 15 minutes, and some people claim that 6 minutes. Some people say 15 minutes is too much, but I myself have found that when I use 15 minutes combined with other stuff that I'm going to talk about in a second, it works. You don't have to create all the videos. You can curate resources, and there's a lot of open knowledge sources. YouTube will be your best friend, honestly. So spend some time doing some research and finding good videos that you can use. What I do and what video-based learning suggests is that you promote active learning by embedded assessments and activities in your videos. That means that there are tools in which they will make the learner pause, and the video will not move or will not continue until you answer certain questions. So that approach that I come here, I click play, and I talk to my roommate, and I use the phone, and I go and prepare a meal, and then I come back and the video is over, that will not work because the video will stop when a question is asked. I will have to answer a question, and then, only then, if correct, the video will continue. That means that if I did not guess right, if I don't have the right answer, I will have to go back and watch that portion of the video again to be able to answer the question, to be able to move forward. So that's the approach there to make it active. And this is really important because this provides an alternative for learners. There are people with some disabilities that they cannot read text well. That's a fact. People with dyslexia, they struggle with text, for instance. And video-based learning can be a powerful tool for those students who need an alternative. So what are the characteristics of an effective video? It has to be relevant. As I said, don't put videos just because you found a video and you might think it will work. I really encourage you to please connect them to your learning objectives. They're short, they're simple, they're user-friendly and compatible, meaning that your students will not have to download a super heavy file, and then when the whole thing is finally in the computer, they hit play, it doesn't play, or the link is broken. That's frustrating. That's why for me, YouTube is my best friend. I upload everything to YouTube, and then I put that link in Canvas or send that via email or anywhere that I'm teaching on. So you can put your channel private. It doesn't have to be public. So I encourage you to think about YouTube because you fight that issue of compatibility. Your videos needs to be concretizing. The beauty of a video is like sometimes you're lecturing and you have concepts that are very abstract and are very hard to explain. And even if you do a good job explaining and showing a picture, it's not until people see a video of something moving and all the parts that you really concretize that you really understand what it means or how it works. And a good example of that is geometry. I think geometry is one of those courses in which when you have a video, a 3D showing all the things and the application and all of that, people get the content better. Your video has to be engaging, and you have to use humor. Humor is a good strategy for an engaging video. I like to be thought-provoking, so controversial issues, an example, so long that there is a line there. They're really good to engage your students. And of course, it has to be realistic. The more you connect your content to real-life settings or to current issues, the more engaging your video will be. I encourage you to rehearse before you record your video. And again, a video is not necessarily a lecture. A video can be a demonstration. A video can be an interview. A video can be actually showing something. So don't think this is a recorded lecture. But whatever you're doing, you have to rehearse, because even when you have to speak to the video, people can tell when you're reading. And when you're reading, sometimes you don't connect with the audience. People want you to be able to tell them a story. They want you to connect with them. And people can always tell when you're reading and when you're not speaking from the heart. And I think that really makes a difference. So be mindful of that. So I'm going to give you an example of a lesson using video-based learning. So I decided to go to Canvas and put together a video-based learning module. I encourage you to start with a short video, humor, an icebreaker, something really, really short, or maybe just a line or two of trivia. Like, hey, did you know this? And you put, the information there. Then I will put my learning objectives for the module, text. Then I start with my first video. Again, 15 minutes or less. I will ask them to have, and again, it has an embedded assessment. And I'm going to show you a tool that I have talked to you about in the past. But you make sure that video has 2 or 3 questions along the way. Then I will promote a discussion or a reflection about that video. Very important. You don't want to move to the next one until they have had the chance of discussing or reflecting on that video. If you're doing a demonstration, I will suggest, and that's why I put optional, to ask them to do a practice and ask them to submit a video. And that's why I like Flipgrid, because with the phone, they can record that demonstration and they can submit that. This is important if you need them to master something that it's a demonstration, because you get to see the application of that first video. Then you have a second video, and you can have 3 or 4 depending, again, with embedded assessments. And I will do something different, like a case scenario or a quizzes activity, just to add something to the mix. And because those 2 examples there, the case scenario and the quizzes activity, they are good for an application. And then I will have a final assessment bringing all of that together. So this is an example of an online module using video-based learning. So the benefits of this is like your students are already using technology, so you're leveraging that. It provides concrete and visual examples that sometimes with the lectures we don't get. You can have thorough demonstrations through the video. It provides a safe space, because sometimes in the real classroom, it's hard to do a demonstration with certain things. With the video, it's safe. And also, again, it's an alternative for those who prefer video. So some technologies for video-based learning, I already talked about Flipgrid. Play Pause It is my all-time favorite. That's where you can get any video, anything that you record, or even a YouTube video, and you can actually embed assessments along the way. The video will stop when you indicate so. It will ask the learner for a question. They have to answer, they have to get the right answer, and then the video continues. So by the time they are done with 15 minutes of video instruction, they will have to show a level of mastery there. I like Articulate 360 because it really allows you to embed video and also assessments. That one is not free, but you can get a free trial. Same with Camtasia. Camtasia, I like it because a couple years ago, they started incorporating the assessment part. So you have a video and you can ask assessments along the way. Of course, YouTube, you can upload your videos on YouTube and share that, and that one is free. So let's go to the next one, but before I do that, let's see if you have any other questions. So what about an informational type video? Can you just include contact info in that case? Yes, you can do that as well. But again, you have to explain the purpose of that video, so they know that that's just informational and that no learning objectives are necessarily connected there. Yeah, there can be multiple right answers embedded. Yes, you can do true or false, multiple choice, multiple right answers. It depends. Be mindful that if you ask them to type a reflection, they might be able to continue because you will have to manually go there and read that text. So I usually just pick something that they can get feedback right away. So a good story has a beginning, middle, end. Is this true of these two then? Yes, I believe so. I like my videos to tell stories, and I like to use a lot of storytelling. Sometimes you can embed content into story, and I think that's really useful in these cases. I did 3 videos for my WD module. So my question is, do I provide a complete PowerPoint that I made the videos for the students? You can do that, or you can break that down, and maybe that will help you to do chunking from the cognitive point of view. Chunking is really useful. So I will use that as an opportunity to do that. Play post-it is really easy. Honestly, it took me like 10 minutes to figure that out. I don't think that's a problem at all. Very user-friendly. You don't need a lot of, being super tech savvy for that. Yes, and again, many of these things, my idea here is to show you everything out there. And the idea is that maybe you can start conversations with your departments and we do it to acquire these tools. I believe that's my mission here, to show you that cool things out there to trigger that curiosity, and hopefully you can implement those. And we help you along the way. So let's continue. Let's talk now about the literature circle. And this is for those of you not only teaching literature, but those of you who has a class that relies a lot on reading articles, journal articles, or anything. Sometimes we don't realize that we are teaching a class that has a lot of readings, more so than what we think. We think only English classes are about the reading or languages, but that's not the case. So number 4, the literature circle. So how does it work? You're going to divide the class in groups, and you're going to assign a chapter or a couple chapters or a couple of journal articles to that group. And again, you're going to provide key points for discussion. As you can see by now, one of the main things that you as an instructor has to do is to give them ahead of time, hey, pay attention to these key ideas, to these key terms, to these keywords. In all of the methods that I have explained, that's fundamental. Why? Because when you do that, you prepare the brain. From the cognitive point of view, when you tell the learner ahead, hey, these are the terms that you have to pay special attention to. Every single time they see the term, it actually triggers a reaction and the attention span increases. So that's why I always encourage you to provide, it can be a short Word document. You can just type it on Canvas, the key points for discussion, the key terms, the keywords. After that, you're going within the group, you're going to assign specific roles, or you can let them assign those roles. And I'm going to talk about the roles in a second. Then after they do that, they are going to share their experience and provide feedback to other groups. And I will make sure I will include formative and summative assessments. So what happens in the literature circle? You are going to have a facilitator. That student is going to make sure that the key points or discussion questions are being discussed. You have a commentator who is a person that based on that, on those discussion points, is going to bring pieces of the article or the passage or the chapter that actually are important to those questions. That's the job of that person. Based on what they read, they have to make connections between the content and those questions. Then I will assign a debater, somebody who's going to be devil's advocate and will refute in a way what the commentator is providing. And that's not with a negative connotation, or basically to be prepared. Because when you're reading something, when you're interpreting something, you have to expect people to sometimes disagree with you. And you know your content when you're able to manage well those controversial situations. Then you have a researcher who is a person who might determine we need more information about these comments, about this piece of information. Maybe we found this in this chapter, in this book, but we need to find out more, and that's the role of that person. You have a technology expert who is the person making sure that this goes to Canvas, Flipgrid, whatever tool you use. Then you have a reflector who is a person making connections between everything that we read and maybe other studies, something in real life, other books, making those connections. And then you have somebody making, taking notes or summarizing the whole experience. You don't need to have all of these roles. I just saw a question in which I was asked what's a good mix of roles. I will say you always need a facilitator, you always need a commentator, and you always need a debater. With the rest, you can live without them, But those three are the main important ones because you need to be able to understand the questions, make sure the questions are answered or the key points are addressed. You have somebody making the connections between the content of that article or that chapter and those questions. And then you need somebody saying, well, I don't agree with this. What if this is the other angle that we have to take a look at? And that's when the conversation becomes rich. The benefits of this is like you make sure all content is covered because everybody has to be prepared to assume the role. So they have to read the content. It's just like the angle that the interpretation is different based on the role. It really fosters collaboration. It teaches students how to read. You know, when I put in quotation marks because reading, sometimes you don't have time to read the whole thing, being realistic. And it's a fact that students, they skim through content or sometimes they don't even read. But here you need to, you learn how to read in such a way that you get the information that you need based on the key points that you provided. It helps you to interpret the information, know how to interpret a journal article, how to interpret a book chapter, how to make the best of that information. It shows you how from one single article, many angles can be seen because you're working with a team. And then it promotes accountability and teamwork because you're working in a team. And again, maybe a whole class, a whole semester cannot be taught using this, but you know, a couple times a semester, once a week or something like that, especially when reading is important for that day, I will use this. So some of the tools are the Flipgrid, as I said, WhatsApp, I mentioned that. WebEx training. It's not WebEx meetings. Now we're in a WebEx meeting. It has to be training, a WebEx training. Why? Because the WebEx training has breakup rooms. And when you are working with a circle, you need to have many circles are going to be meeting at once. So you need the training. Make a note of that because that's the big difference. Slack allows that communication as well. And I like Google Docs and Google Slides. Again, through your UNCP account, you can access them because they have that collaboration component. So all the roles can be dumping content in these files and being able to address that. And yes, there's a whole body of knowledge about literature circles. And again, if you really know how to use these, you can help your students to understand easier a journal article, interpret data, read a book chapter, and use content from these readings to an application in real life or to a larger body of knowledge. So number 5, the simulation and digital game-based learning. So basically, how this happens is like you are going to be immersed in a game. You're going to be immersed in a simulation. You're going to be part of an alternative world. Americans, and I say Americans because when I did my research, I'm more aware of this part of the world. It's true that Americans spend a lot of time playing games. So the benefit of this is like you leverage that fascination that people here have for games, and you bring that to the classroom experience. What is really important here is that you have to have learning outcomes and tasks. Don't ask people just to go into a simulation and hang out, hang around, lurk, or don't ask them to play a game if there's not a clear learning outcome. And the challenging part of a simulation or digital game-based learning is that sometimes you have the experience, but you don't have a learning outcome. And then your students are playing and they're like, so what? So the challenging part will be for you to determine what games are aligned with your learning objectives. Always ask your students to take notes and journal because that journaling process makes you understand the experience they went through their eyes, you know. Ask your students to share notes and observations with others in class, maybe a presentation, a discussion. Make sure this is available and affordable, and this is something that you might have to work with your department, and make sure you always assess knowledge. Assessment of digital game-based learning can be embedded, meaning that things that happen in the game can be evidence of mastery of knowledge, but sometimes you want to do something external. So you can ask them to go through the simulation, through the game, and at the end you can have an assessment, a multiple choice test, an essay, it's up to you. So you can use both the external assessment and the embedded assessment of the simulation and the game. So an example of a module, if I have to create a lesson using a simulation on digital game-based learning, I will start with my introduction, always your learning objectives, the key items that they have to pay attention in that simulation or in that game, review. In order for this to be effective, your students should master certain things. So in review, you're going to tell them things like, make sure you understand these definitions or you know these definitions. Make sure you have read these chapters. Make sure you have completed these activities. Make sure you master all of these, whatever it needs to happen. Then you have your play simulation time. And then you need to have a debriefing discussion reflection, because you want to understand why the choices they made through the game or the simulation happened. That's when you know if they are just playing for the sake of playing or you see an actual demonstration of knowledge. And optionally, you can have a bigger assessment at the end. So this is basically what a model will look like. So the benefits, it's like it provides a safe space for practicing and modeling. You can sometimes travel back to the past. It's hard to understand what a castle, what a society was back in the days, what a lab was back in the 18th century, but with a simulation, you can travel back to the past. It provides a medium for field trips. If you need a field trip, this might be the solution for you. And when you play certain games with some controversial, difficult topics, it helps students develop empathy. So this one is not free. I'm not going to lie to you. This one is not free, but sometimes in life, not everything can be free. I wish everything would be free. So for science and all of that, I will say that the Labster, it's a company that they're not really expensive, but for sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, they have really good simulations. I encourage you to check their website. And again, this is something that you will have to internally discuss with your department, but it's worth having it. Unity and GameMaker, those are that software to create and develop games. I have used them both, and I don't think they're too hard to make. But honestly, you can also hire that. The software is not expensive, and you can hire somebody to do game design and pay like $25 an hour. It's not too expensive to have it designed. And again, that was my research when I went to grad school to do my PhD. I focused on digital game-based learning. And I can tell you that sometimes the game itself provides a true representation of the concepts. And that's why it's effective. Not only because it's fun, but because you actually get to apply what you learn and you see concrete examples. It really, really changes the perspective that you have about a topic. So, and online, there are several resources. And we can talk about free games that you can find online for politics, for compliance, for social sciences, for math. There are so many. So we can talk about that. Let's talk about learning stations. Learning stations is basically when you have breakout rooms, and in each room you have a different type of activity. So basically, you can even have a host. You can ask one student to be the host of that station. So you provide an outline ahead of time of all the stations that there are, all the breakout rooms, and all the activities and resources that they're going to find in those. Make sure you give your students tasks to complete in each station. So they don't have to just go into this breakout room and just hang out. There must be a task for them to complete. You might ask the host to give an endorsement for those who actually completed the activities. And then that's what you check at the end. And usually try to tell them how much time they have to go through all the stations. Don't tell them how much time they have to spend in each station, but tell them overall, okay, you have an hour to go through all these 4 stations. Why? because based on my knowledge and proficiency, some stations I can be done honestly in 5 minutes, but others I might need 20. So give an overall estimate. And then you can have a final assessment. You can have small assessments in each station, formative assessments. And then at the end, a very big one. They can go by groups or they can go individually. It's up to you, depends on the number of people. I like individually for the stations because it's a personal activity in a way, but and then at the end you can have a group assessment. That's my preference. So I'm gonna give an example of the stations. I go to WebEx training and I'm gonna create 5 breakout rooms. One is gonna be called prior knowledge. There I'm gonna have articles, videos, something that they need to know ahead of time, just checking prior knowledge. Then I have a second station in which I can have a host discussing the chapter, discussing the reading, or I can put some videos on some podcasts or some bullets about the discussion of that chapter. After that, I can have another station for them to complete a quiz to check their knowledge. Then I can have another station that is more case-based scenarios for them to apply their knowledge. And then I can have a final station for them to reflect and complete an activity. So again, it depends how much time they have. You can give them more than 1 day, more than an hour to go through all the stations. You can give them a week to go through the 5 stations, but they have to complete activities in each one. So you use WebEx training if you're using this synchronously. You use Canvas if you're doing this asynchronously, and each module will be a station, so to speak. So the benefits is that it provides a multiple representation of knowledge. Your students can focus on specific stations more so than in others. You're promoting self-directed learning and also reinforcement because you have so many activities and assessments that it's really useful. And as I said, Canvas for asynchronous and WebEx training for synchronous are the way to go. So let's talk now about the Jigsaw. I really like the Jigsaw as well. So the way it works is that you're going to list all the key elements in the lesson. You're going to list them all and you give them ahead of time. You're going to create teams. And let's say that you have 10 key items. I will make sure each team has 10 members or so. You do the math, but you have to usually have same number of key items, same number of members in a team. You let the students distribute the key items, like, okay, you decide who is going to take which part of the list. You give your students a deadline, but you let them work on their own, meaning that, let's say you tell them, okay, you have 25 minutes, but don't tell them anything else. They decide how to use those 25 minutes or that week or that day, whatever time. That job of the student is to read the text, watch a video, listen to a podcast, anything they have to do to explain to the other members of that group that key item. It's in a way similar to the task cards, but the difference is like you work here internally in a group. The task card is more for the rest of the class. And the task card, you don't know what term you're going to get. Here, you know ahead what term you have to focus on. Make sure they verify that all the key items are covered, and then you have to determine a final assessment. That assessment, you have to make sure forces your students to listen to the interventions of the other teammates. Okay? It really promotes accountability because I'm responsible for this part and nobody else is going to read that part. So my team depends on me for them to understand that part. And they will be assessed at the end based on my description of my part. So you're accountable. It's a self-assessment because you really have to make sure you as a group understand the whole process, the whole information to take that assessment. And sometimes the assessment is not in groups. So you have to make sure you provide as much information as possible so that people can take that assessment on their own. It provides multiple representations of knowledge and, of course, promotes teamwork and project management. So I will use Flipgrid for asynchronous with Canvas, and WebEx training because of the breakout rooms for synchronous. Let's talk about now about the instructional menu. This is a lot of fun. It's a little different. So the instructional menu is when you divide all your content into, I would say 4 categories, but it's up to you. And one of them is the appetizer, then you have the main course, you can have sides, and then you have dessert. For each category, like a menu, you have some options, and you can ask them to actually have some mandatory, not optional options. And then your students get to choose from the menu, and that's what they complete. So for example, I go to Canvas and I create a menu like this. And for appetizer, I ask them to choose one between a video, a news article, a case. They pick one. From the main course, they have to choose 2. One of them can be, chapter 3. They have to read chapter 3. But then they get to choose reading a journal article or a TED Talk. For sites, they pick two sites, and they can read a website or engage in a discussion or have a flashcard activity. And then for research, they choose one, which can be a reflection or an e-portfolio article. So it's kind of fun. It's very simple, but for some reason people like it. I don't know. There is something about being able to choose that people really like. So again, it gives, as a benefit, it gives freedom to the student to an extent. It also allows students to benefit from optional resources. Sometimes you list a lot of optional resources, and believe me, nobody read them. That's true. It happens to all of us. Nobody read optional items. But when you put them in a menu like this, you will see more people going through the optional ones. And also, they can focus on the content that they really need. They get to pick what they really have to focus on. So let's talk about now the podcast. The podcast is basically a recorded audio in which you're going to interview someone. They're very popular nowadays, and sometimes instead of lecturing, you might benefit from interviewing someone. So as I said before, make sure you have a list of key items before the podcast that your students have to pay attention to. Make sure your podcast covers 2 or 3 learning objectives. No more than that. I don't think in a podcast you can go beyond 3 good learning objectives. Make sure the questions are aligned to the learning objectives. When you are formulating the questions to ask the guest, make sure you classify them. Which learning objectives these questions are addressing. That keeps you focused. And then you can ask your students as an assessment, like, hey, these are some questions that you have to answer based on the information of the podcast. Very, very important. So these are some instances when a podcast can be used. The author of an article or a book that you want to interview, a relevant personality for the community, an entrepreneur, or a researcher, an athlete, a fellow faculty member, an artist, or somebody already doing the job. These are some examples of that. So some tips for a good engaging podcast: make it short, no more than an hour. Make it conversational, make it a conversation, not fully script, but you need to have structure. It's okay to have humor and be candid, spontaneous. I encourage you to pre-interview your guests and give them the questions ahead of time so they are prepared. And then make sure you assess your students in a creative way to make sure if they were listening to the podcast, you can ask them something like, where could have the guest given us more information? Or what would you ask the guest? Because if you tell me, I will ask the guest what makes them happy, for instance, and the guest said that in the podcast, I know they didn't pay attention. So you have to be tricky there to make sure that they are listening to the content. The podcast promotes networking because they get to connect with other people, and it also brings another expert besides you and another role model to the classroom. It really offers a current perspective for a topic, and it leverages the use of social media in students. And that's because the platforms that I suggest for a podcast are tools that they're using. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, the IGTV from Instagram Live. And also if you want to go old school, you can have Cisco WebEx. which I used when we did the webinar, the podcast yesterday, and it went well. So you can use something simple like that. So for number 10, I really struggle because there are so many other instructional methods, and I have to pick the final one and make it a good one. And I was like, what exactly do I feel sometimes it's a gap or an issue and all of that? And in my own experience and conversation with all of you, I have learned that students struggle to study in an online course. They struggle to master content. We are engaging, we focus on the technology, but sometimes they don't know how to study or prepare or succeed in an online course. And I realized that there is a tool that I'm sure all of you have used, I have used, but for some reason we don't use it as often in online courses. And it's a replacement from the lecture, and it's really old school. And I'm sure all of you are familiar as my last instructional method, and to end up this presentation, the SQ3R. As you know, it stands for survey, questions, read, recite, and review. That means that basically you are going to tell the students what topics they're going to explore first in that module. You give them or ask students to have some questions that they have to answer. Then your students will have to read or maybe watch, because if you have videos, they have to watch. Then they have to recite the answer to those questions. And then they will have a review, which is basically another assessment or a practice that you provide to be able to have the demonstration. Old school, I'm sure you have all used it, and sometimes we forget. And when you see a student struggling in an online course to master that material, use this, because that's what I have done, and you really tell the difference. Really easy. Some tips is like you should provide the guiding questions. If you ask me, you should give the questions. I will include more than readings, that's why I put watch. And also I will tell them how much time they can expect to spend in each of these activities. I will embed assessments along the way as well. The more practice, the better. Practice makes perfect, you know that. And then I will encourage your students to use this method when they are starting with online. Old school, a classic, but it really works all the time. And with that, my friends, I wrap up this presentation. It has been really fun to share with you these 19 instructional methods in 2 parts. There are 150, there are many. And I really have to pick the ones that I felt were realistic and applicable and that you can definitely benefit from. This is my contact information. I did my very best to condense all the information in 2 hours, just an overview. I'm sure you have questions, you have follow-up comments, all of that, and I will appreciate helping you more. That's my job, to present the options, to trigger that curiosity, and to help you get to wherever you want to be, and for you to pick from all these choices. So absolutely, let me know if there's anything I can do to assist you. Thank you so much for the feedback. I appreciate that. I'm going to, yeah, I think I covered all the questions. I'm going through all the comments. Thank you so much for the feedback. This is amazing. I'm very happy to know that you guys find some value in the things that we do. Stay tuned. We're going to be offering more of these sessions throughout that semester. It's been a pleasure. Have a good rest of your day. We have a session at 1 p.m., a panel. So please, if you can join us then, we will appreciate it. Have a good one. Bye.